Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update Part 2 for the 10th of August 2023. We're going to start with the frontline update segment. We're going to go straight to the northeast sector, which is Kupiansk down to Crimea, and up near Kupiansk in this place called Liman Pershi, where the Oskil River comes down here. There were reports yesterday that Ukraine has advanced in the forest northwest of Liman Pershi, adding 0.6 square kilometers to the liberated status. It's quite interesting because the Russians have been advancing quite widely to the east of here, and this is an area that the Russians seem to have had some success in over the last sort of month, pushing down the Oskil River through this forested area and taking Liman Pershi, that was sort of in the grey zone. Some claiming it was Russian control, but they've struggled to kind of get past this area to Sinkivka and towards Kupiansk. Well, now the Ukrainians are pushing back there, and even Suryat Maps has this admission too, showing that area to the west of Liman Pershi, and the Russians are pushing on from Liman Pershi to Sinkivka. Now, I always find it interesting how Suryat Maps phrases these successes for Ukraine. So, situation on the northeastern front. Recent video footage published by the Russian MOD and later by TASS shows Russian army shelling Ukrainian troops in positions which were theoretically taken at the end of July. So he had this area being Russian, taken at the end of July. So only a sort of week and a half ago, the area was subjected to fast changes between both sides. But also, it's very possible that Russian troops at the Molchanovo train station used that as a launching point for skirmishes and later returning to that position. So that's the railway station somewhere around here that I was pointing out to you some time back as being taken as a little blue roof. On the other hand, there are reports that Russians reached the town of Sinkivka, the last area before the outskirts of Kupiansk, but this wasn't confirmed so far. So it's like, yeah, sort of couched in a way of it's not success for the Ukrainians so much as like, to and fro and this and that, and okay, but then look, they're pushing here, and it's always interesting how they couch everything. And you could probably make the same claims with what I say, but I'm always very onto what sort of language people use when they talk about successes or failures. And then this again interesting, showing this is going now all the way down to Bakhmut. I haven't heard too much about what's going on in that northeastern area of, say, Novoselivska and Kozymivka, but also Karmazianivka to the west, to northwest and southwest of Svatova. But in my frontline update later today, I will have more information for you on those areas for sure. Here, Suryat Maps is admitting that Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back by the railway line to the north of Klishchivka. This is where Andrew Perpetua said the Ukrainians had taken control a good week ago now. Suryat Maps is sort of catching up. It seems very slow around here. Still has Klishchivka fully under control of the Russians. Situation south of Bakhmut, new advances were made by the Ukrainian army north of the town of Klishchivka, and that's that there. Not too much really from Suryat Maps on their updates so far, but some will come out between now and the frontline update. And then really it's all the way down to Uruzhany here in the southern front line on the Donetsk to Zaporizhia area. We have the Mokry Yali River coming down here, splitting Staromyrsky and Uruzhany, and the Ukrainians coming down. This is the Velika Novosilka salient coming down through Uruzhany. Ukraine's forces have officially entered the northern part of Uruzhany. That was announced yesterday. And then there was a number of announcements sort of throughout the evening, my time, really, on what was going on. Positive news coming from Uruzhany. Russian sources report the Russians have been surrounded and lost communication, suffered high casualties with no chance for a tactical withdrawal. They now ask for Putin's blessings and prayers for a breakthrough. That was one claim. And then later, we heard Russian Vostok Battalion saying about the situation in Uruzhany. This is Katakovsky. There is, or I don't know whether it's definitely him, but he's in charge of that. There is information that the same positions the enemy managed to squeeze us out, and Uruzhany was partially encircled, but it is difficult to understand the real situation right now. And now No Reports is saying that actually, this was last night, Ukrainian tank fires at a Russian position inside Uruzhany. So the fight is definitely taking place near the center. So this is kind of geo-confirmed evidence for that. And then No Reports then says today, footage from inside Uruzhany, Ukrainian forces on the move in the center close to Mokry Yali River, and their gunshots can be seen hitting the ground. So there's definitely a fight going on. Still, the Ukrainians have reached the center. So that if we go back to the here, back to this map, so the center I'd assume is somewhere down here. It means that what we're hearing about Uruzhany appears to be pretty much justified. And yeah, then it's on to Robot. So that's to say that Uruzhany is being incrementally the Russians are being pushed back incrementally from Uruzhany, as you would expect. I mean, they're being attacked from the north, the west, and the east simultaneously. So it's going to be almost impossible for them to hold on to that. Here, if we go west into Zaporizhia for sure, we come across Robotna and Verbove. The armed forces of Ukraine knocked out Russian troops from several strongholds between the villages of Robotny and Verbove and came close to Robotna. There are tough fights. Now, this is interesting. This is Andrew Perpetua's live stream at the end talking about how, and this is, funnily enough, exactly what I've been saying, which is this is the area of the toughest defenses, Robotna, in terms of entrenchments and minefields. There's like 3 or 4 lines of them, and then you get to Tokmak. So he was saying right before the counteroffensive started, I hope they don't go the route to Tokmak and try and take Tokmak. It's just too difficult. Velika Novosilka, this kind of area is far more sensible. And I'll show you this on the maps, later in more detail. But the Ukrainians have made significant losses around Robotna and Verbove. Although they are making incremental gains there, it's coming at quite a large loss. And you're just wondering, is this the most sensible place to be attacking? I mean, you're attacking where the Russians are strongest. That seems to not be kind of maneuver warfare. It's exploiting the weaknesses and the gaps. That deep battle approach. But I don't know that this is that. This is like the least sensible option, unless. But I don't have all the information these guys have. But you'd assume they'd be making sensible decisions on the basis of the best information. Nonetheless, they are apparently making some gains there, but then the Russians say that they make gains there. It's one of those places you're not quite sure who's being wholly honest about what's going on in Robotna. Right, moving on to the Kherson front and Cossack camp, or the Kozachi Lahiri area. The armed forces of Ukraine have further expanded their bridgehead in the vicinity of the Cossack camps, says Astraea Intel. There was talk about them being, having flanked Kozachi Lahiri possibly, and certainly from the west and coming down towards Chelberda, a small settlement just south of there. Haven't heard too much since then. But this is probably the most significant update from Suryat Map. So they say the strategy of draining Ukrainian resources on the northeastern front by Russian forces has been discussed previously. However, it is necessary to talk about the same strategy being pursued by Russian forces with respect to Russian resources on the Kherson front since the beginning of the August. So this is exactly right. But I love the way it's kind of like, I suppose we have to talk about this. The Ukrainians doing this too. Again, it's the way that they phrase everything. But exactly true. Well, I've been talking about these 2 examples of the same strategy, which is in the north, the Russians are trying to divert and fix Ukrainian troops in place in Luhansk and Kharkiv, so that Ukrainians can't use those troops in counteroffensive. The problem is Ukraine has far greater reserves than the Russians, it appears, and they're not really dipping into their counteroffensive reserves to do the defending up there. But anyway, that's the principle behind that. Meanwhile, down in Kherson, the Ukrainians are doing exactly that, which is trying to fix Russian troops into the Dnipro River area, which means they aren't going to be defending in the Zaporizhia region, for example. But the difference here is if the up in Kharkiv and Luhansk in the Kupiansk area, if the Russians can make a bit of a breakthrough, they don't really have the reserves to sustain huge the logistics and the reserves to not liberate to occupy huge amounts of land up there and have these big. They're not on the offensive really. This is kind of a form of defense to try and mess up the Ukrainian offense. Whereas down in Kherson, if the Russians don't rush to support uh, places like Kozachi Lahiri, then the Ukrainians get a bridgehead across the Dnipro and they can attack down into Crimea. And it becomes a really massive problem because they have a shed load of reserves to bring to bear, as I was talking about with what Thomas Tyner said earlier about having 111 brigades to do all this stuff. And so all the the Ukrainians it's the same strategy, but the ramifications for not supporting in each place are quite different, and the Russians are really presented with a dilemma, much more so than the Ukrainians. I would wager. Since the beginning of August, the Ukrainian army has increased its control over the islands in the mouth of Dnipro. The breach of the Kakhovka Dam was substantially favoured the Ukrainians, who have increased attacks on Russian positions on the southern bank. These attacks are not aimed at initiating the recapture of the Kherson Oblast, but at temporarily capturing positions and checking Russian defensives in order to force the arrival of reinforcements from the Zaporizhia area and thus enable Ukrainian forces to advance through the said oblast towards Melitopol. I mean, either way, if they don't support Kherson, then they get to march towards Armyansk from the Dnipro. So it's a real bind for the Russians. For the moment, it does not seem to have a great impact on the celebrated summer counteroffensive. Well, we'll see, as hardly any important achievements have been made. This shows that success in this war will depend on the ability of the sides to manage and replenish their resources by taking advantage of the imbalance to tip the balance to their side. The moment has not yet arrived. That's I suppose true to an extent, but I think it's probably overselling Russia. The hardly any important achievements. I think this is quite an important achievement, and we're in a balance, I guess, right now as to whether Russia will be able to deal with that with significant reserves, whether Ukraine are going to be able to push enough forces across the water to cause the Russians something to really think about. Anyway, let's move on. Military aid. Okay, not too much to report. Germany has confirmed new military aid. Now, I always worry about this when people report this. This isn't new military aid. This is moved from pledged to delivered. So this has been delivered now to Ukraine, but it's not new. I mean, it's new as in they didn't have it like the day before, but they have it now type thing. But this is not a new announcement. This had already been announced. So what have they been delivered? 10 all-terrain vehicles of Bahnwagen. Those are those kind of articulated tracked vehicles that you're more likely see in Arctic snowy areas. Really useful still for Ukraine. 2 Patriot launchers, obviously very useful. 6,000, I think that is 6,525 155mm smoke and ammunition. Material for explosive ordnance disposal. That might be stuff to go on Mikliks or similar. 5 border protection vehicles, 4 vector drones, 1,163 binoculars, 20,000 safety glasses, 6 tractor trains, 8x8 and semi-trailers, 2 load handling trucks, 8x6 with 1 roll of containers, 100 machine guns for the MG5 machine guns, and 40,000 first aid kits. So that is a pretty good list of stuff for the Ukrainians and a lot of support vehicles that will be very, very useful. Okay, for the first time, ammo produced by North Korea has been spotted in the hands of the Russian military. These are R122 1-2 mm rockets recently started to be issued to Russian BM-21 Grad crews. According to the images, nearly all the markings on the rockets were sanitized. I guess that means they've been sort of scrubbed off, but they are North Korean. Now, I was reading elsewhere, here, though the rockets are indeed manufactured by North Korea, they are unlikely to be directly supplied by North Korea. Based on the information we obtained regarding other types of munitions delivered recently, including another Grad rocket type to be revealed soon, the most likely supply is Iran, which is known to possess R-122 rockets and previously supplied refurbished Soviet 152 mil shells to Russia. So these two-tone rockets, yeah, that is not unsurprising. Yeah, it is unsurprising. Sorry, because we know that they're doing a lot of deals with Iran. We know that the Caspian Sea is an important logistical route for uh, stuff coming from Iran. Shahed drones, obviously, perhaps longer range cruise missiles coming. There's been a lot of talk about them from Iran, and general ammunition for artillery and multiple launch rocket systems. Of course, Iran themselves possibly getting into a little bit of hot water geopolitically around. The question is, and they were having those riots as well. Do they want to be giving Russia everything? There are going to be considerations going both ways there, but they are certainly very close to Russia at the moment, even though they did have that argument over those islands to the south of Iran. Ukraine handed the Pentagon the first report on the use of US supplied cluster munitions. According to CNN, don't know what the report says, but I will be very interested to see what it says. I'm sure that'll come out over the next few days or so. Right. Moving on, so not a lot of military aid news. Thomas Tyner again. Talk about this is geopolitical stuff. So Tommy Tuberville, he's a U.S. senator, a Republican senator. This is a bit of a rant from Thomas Tyner, and it's going to go on to Ukrainian stuff. This is mainly to do with the US military at the moment. He blocks all flag officer confirmations, and so Marine Corps, Army, and Navy have no commanding officers, and soon no deputy commanders. Also, the Air Force, the US Pacific Fleet, the Cyber Command, and the Indo-Pacific Command, Northern Command, Space Command, all Air Combat Command, Pacific Air Forces, etc., are about to lose their commanding officers. More than 300 plus US military commands will be without a commanding officer soon. Worst hit is the Pacific with no overall commander, no naval commander, no Air Force commander, no Marine Expeditionary Force commander, no US 3rd Fleet commander, no US 7th Fleet commander. If China attacks Taiwan, there is no Senate confirmed officer in all of the Pacific to command a response. Also, no 5 Corps commander, which is tasked to defend Europe from Russian. No 7th, 8th, 15th, 20th Air Force commanders, and so on and so on. And every week it gets worse. Tuberville blazing a path for China to win a war against the US. Tuberville is far, far worse than Benedict Arnold. Now, Tuberville is doing this for political reasons, such as he doesn't want the US military to give, for example, reproductive health care to members, particularly obviously women, and so on and so forth. And he's holding out for political reasons that is actually damaging the national security of the United States. I mean, this is terrible. And not to do with Ukraine per se, although there are connections, because obviously, you need a sound operating military to be able to give Ukraine all the military support you can in terms of logistics, in terms of thinking, and so on and so forth. Anyway, on top of that, Tommy Tuberville, oh my goodness, I'm just this guy. This guy needs to be gone. Tuberville says Ukraine can't win the war. It's a junior high team playing a college team. He said recently in an interview, compared Ukraine's efforts to a junior high team trying to defeat a college team in a hypothetical sports match. In an interview with Fox News' Laura Ingraham on Monday night, Tuberville touted his record voting against funding for Ukraine and said that while he supported the country's effort over Russia, he thought Ukraine was outmatched and that no amount of funding would change that. It's just utter nonsense. What he's saying is it is even hypothetically impossible for Ukraine to win. Like, even if you gave it a gazillion Spondoulis and all the equipment in the universe, it still can't win. I mean, he's basically, that's pretty much what he's saying. I haven't voted for a dime to send to Ukraine, Tuberville told Ingram. I'm for Ukraine. Russia should never have done this. I was in Ukraine 3 months with President Zelensky before this started. They were already fighting to that point. But at the end of the day, it's a junior high team playing a college team, he continued. They can't win. We can throw all the money we want to, but unless we send NATO and our troops over, which we're not going to do, if I have got anything to do with it, then there's no chance. Just absolute shocker. Tuberville's comments come amid increasing concern that support for Ukraine might be waning among American voters and among Republicans in Congress. This is, then reported by MSNBC's. Tuberville brags about voting against funding for Ukraine. It's not good. So if you know Tuberville, if you live in his in his state, sorry, words fail me, or if you want to shoot him a message on Twitter, please do so. Anyway, Latvia has joined the G7 Declaration on Security Assurances for Ukraine, according to Latvian Prime Minister Krišjānis Kariņš. To quote, "Together with our partners, we will support Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression for as long as it takes." Rather a similar rhetoric, rather a different rhetoric, sorry, to Tommy Tuberville. Germany arrests military officer suspected of spying for Russia. So German authorities arrested an officer of the military procurement agency on suspicion that he was passing sensitive information to Russia, the Bild newspaper reported on August the 9th. And then, I don't know if you remember this. This was like highly controversial. I can't remember if was your man Nigel Farage at this wedding as well. No, I can't remember. Anyway, if you remember sometime back, former Austrian foreign minister Karin Kneißl, who infamously danced with Putin in 2018, so was it her wedding, has settled in the small Russian village of Petrushovo. So, shows who butters her bread. The Austrian foreign minister, it's a bit like Gerhard Schröder, seems to be very close to Russia at the moment, going to the embassy to celebrate their victory day, as he did, I think. It's like, yeah, who's paying your rent? She says she was invited to St. Petersburg State University to teach the oil and gas market. So there you go. She's, what's that? Oh, yeah, morally compromised. That's the end of my news piece today. That's hopefully a slightly shorter one than part A. Apologies, not sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Take care, everybody. I'll speak to you later. Thanks for all your support. Toodle pips.